Holistic Health Counseling Center. For today's video on art therapy, we're going to be talking about painting materials you might encounter in a session. So let's get started. Blog post, we talked a lot about drawing materials and what they do for us. They tend to be more structured, so they hold their shape and their form when applied to a surface. And for this video post, we're going to talk a lot more about our unstructured materials that we find in painting. So these would be more fluid and tend to have more movement on the paper. These are considered our paints, watercolors, acrylics, gouaches, tempera paint, and we're going to go a little bit more in depth in what they can do for us, how they might make us feel, how comfortable or uncomfortable. In our last blog post, we talked a lot about drawing materials. We have our paint itself, so the substance that we do want to apply onto our surface, as well as the tool. So this could be your paintbrush, it could be a sponge, it could be a stick, string. There's different ways that we can apply the paint. It could be with our hands, right? We can use our body. So it's important to point that out in terms of the process of painting, that there are a multitude of materials we can use to apply this material to its surface, and the surface itself can be varied. So we can apply paint to a canvas, to paper, to wood, right? There's a lot of different mediums and surfaces that we can use. With our paint materials such as watercolor, acrylic, tempera paints, we might consider these less structured materials on our spectrum. And generally that does hold, but it's interesting that there can be structure within painting. So this can be based on how much water you're using, what kind of tool you're using, right? If you're using your hands, a paintbrush, the type of brush and bristles that you're using. So all of these different components can actually shift with how much control or how little control you have when you're working with these materials. To know as well that different paint will have different viscosity and thickness, meaning that when you apply it to your paper, it might hold its shape a little bit more. So a thicker body acrylic paint, once you apply it directly to the surface, it can stay there until you intervene, right? But a watercolor paint, typically out of the tube, it can be more fluid when you add more water to it. And that's usually typical of most of the painting materials. When more water is added, that's more fluid and more movement on the surface. We might be thinking, what is the therapeutic component of painting? Why might we want to engage in a painting process versus a drawing or sculpting process? And that's a great question. Painting can tap into a lot of different aspects of ourselves, right? A cognitive component, an emotional component, even sensory, right? If we're doing finger painting. But often it does bring up an emotional response in us. So oftentimes we might not know what to expect, right? With watercolor paints, when we're adding a lot of fluid and motion and movement, things shape and form in front of us that we may not have expected. And so that can generate a lot of different emotions in us, right? We might feel sad that something we liked just changed, or we might feel excited by something that we didn't realize could happen, right? If the purple and the blue mix together, that could be a surprising effect and something that maybe we didn't plan. In the painting process, there's no right or wrong way to use the materials. There's no certain tool that you need to use to apply it. Often I will say start out by engaging in some expressive painting, and that really helps us to loosen up our inhibitions and also reduce any perfectionistic tendencies that we might have. Meaning that I am letting go of any expectations of how this is going to look, and I'm really letting my emotional experience, my bodily sensations drive what I'm creating in front of me. And I wanted to add that the goal of expressing ourselves through paint is to be spontaneous and literally go with the flow. That's a huge theme with painting and what it teaches us, that often we try so hard to structure or plan or shape our lives or have control over what happens. And painting really shows us that we can engage in an unplanned, unstructured way and respond to ourselves, respond to our needs, our emotions in the moment, and things will be okay. In fact, it shows us that there are things that we can expect. And those could be great surprises. They could be what we might consider a mistake, but also something we can learn from, right? If I accidentally dripped a color green where my yellow is, I might initially be disappointed or upset, but that's a moment where I can learn to manage and decide, am I able to keep working with this image, and how can I embrace this mistake, right? How can I turn this into something transformative, where this was meant to happen and now it's becoming something different. We let go of a rigid image and we allow ourselves to just grow and be with the image itself, the paint. It's less about it being something and more about expressing how we're feeling and working through those emotions in the moment. Share a little bit about my own experience with painting. You could see in the background an image that I created that was very expressive, and I really focused on the colors. So when we think about creating art in an art therapy session, and if we're focusing on being more expressive with our emotions, we might initially be drawn to color. So some of us might be afraid of color, some of us might be open to it, but I encourage you to really explore what colors you're drawn to, right? And what it looks like when you apply them to the page. So you might start off with the whole image being white, right? Like a white canvas or white paper. How can you transform it? What would it look like for the whole surface to be a dark blue or a black? What would it look like to cover it with yellow? What if you were to put that black surface on the background and then add bright colors on top? How does that transform how you're feeling when you look at the piece? So there's a therapeutic component of painting, yes, right? Applying it, focusing in, really deciding, okay, what's my next color that I'm applying? And it's also amazing to sit back and look at what you've created and allow yourself to respond. Wow, that's so, that feels so amazing to look and see how I started here and the work got to this point that it looks so different. And that's how we might even view ourselves in our process of therapy, right? Wow, I came in starting here, and over time, over working through my fears, right, any issues that I've been having, I'm able to sort of see the trajectory. And that's what the painting process is about. It's not necessarily reaching the end point right away, but really embracing what it takes to get to, a certain point. And that's sort of the beauty of painting. It's really the process. Something to pay attention to, especially in an art therapy session, is how we're being in the moment. We talk a lot about mindfulness in psychotherapy, counseling, and that's something to bring into an art therapy practice in session, especially with paint, right? A lot of our focus and attention really is with the material on the surface and how it's transforming in front of us, changing, shaping itself. It's less about what happened yesterday, how I was angry with this person, and it really becomes, how am I working through my emotions in this moment? How am I reacting to maybe this green interfering with this blue, or how wonderfully this pink and purple is creating a new color? I'm really taking this moment to learn and grow in a mindful way. So we might be wondering, what do I need to prepare for a painting session? Obviously, if you're working with an art therapist, they're going to have the environment set up for you. You might expect having a mat or something covering the table, a plastic tablecloth, if you will. And you can also work off of a canvas if you like, on an easel. That's up to you and what you're comfortable with. You could also just have a piece of paper in front of you and work from there. I usually recommend having paper towels or rags that you don't mind getting dirty to dry your brush on, and also a water cup. So we didn't cover oil paints in this session. They're a little bit more complex, but your acrylics, tempera paints, gouaches, watercolors, you can all use water to rinse off your brush and also add to the paint, again, to make it more transparent. If you're working with watercolors that come in a pan, that means those sets where there's the circular or square colors already set up for you. You just have to add water with your brush. If you're working with the watercolors that come in a tube, often it's helpful to get a container that you can put the colors in and then add your water from there. And depending on what surface you want to use, I always recommend a mixed media paper. I use the Canson XL, but there's watercolor paper that's specifically for that. And acrylic, you can use a mixed media paper. You can use canvas, a canvas board, or stretched canvas. So it's really up to you. You can also use watercolor on canvas. It's really your preference. video was informative in understanding a little bit more about what painting materials you might encounter in an art therapy session. Of course, there are a lot of different processes, a lot of different materials that you might see, and that, their questions may come up. So if you'd like to reach out, please feel free. Again, my name is Lauren Fallett. I work for Holistic Health Counseling Center, New Jersey. Our website is holistichealthcounselingcenter.com, and you can also visit our art therapy website at arttherapynj.com. Thank you, and look forward to seeing you at the next video. Bye.